That morning the early sunlight spread across the garden, painting every tender leaf in gold and glimmering over the small pond in front of the house. Tieu bent down, shoveling one heavy scoop of soil after another, each spadeful thick with dew and damp earth. Her messy hair clung to her forehead, wet with sweat, yet her eyes still shone, the quiet glow of a woman used to hardship but who had never once allowed herself to collapse. On the porch, her baby boy, only a few months old, lay quietly on an old blanket. His tiny hands waved gently in the air, as if trying to catch the sunlight brushing his cheeks. Each time a breeze slipped through the doorway he smiled, babbling softly, and her heart melted. She looked up at him for a moment, then went back to leveling the soil around the vegetable patch. "As long as you stay healthy and gentle, my child. No hardship is too much for your mother to bear," she thought to herself. The vegetable rows glistened a fresh green, each young sprout growing as if breathing in rhythm with the mother and child. Around the pond the ducks quacked noisily, their wings stirring the water into shimmering ripples of golden light. The starfruit tree at the edge of the yard hung heavy with fruit, and the papayas by the fence bowed low under their weight. Everything seemed so peacefully still, as if life itself had decided to grant them a tiny corner of calm amid the storms of the world. Yet deep inside Tieu's heart lingered a quiet fear, one she dared not share with anyone. On sleepless nights, she would watch her baby's peaceful face and swallow her tears. She was afraid that this fragile peace was no more than morning mist, something a single soft wind could easily blow away. The sound of a mountain stream trickled into a clay jar by the porch, clear, steady, like a simple song of the forest. Tieu bent down to wash the mud from her hands, then lifted her head, her tangled hair damp with sweat. She smiled to herself, the gentle smile of a woman long accustomed to sun, wind, and toil. When the jar was full, she returned to the small garden in front of the house and kept digging. Each stroke of her hoe rang in rhythm with the chirping of birds and the whisper of wind through the trees. In the distance, kitchen smoke curled into the sky, blending with the scent of ripening rice, the scent of home, simple yet heartwarming. The sun rose higher, its light falling straight onto the yard. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, glistening like dew breaking on leaves. When the work was done for a while, she set the hoe aside, let out a soft breath, and walked back to the porch. Inside, her baby boy, just a few months old, lay playing on an old blanket. His round eyes followed her, tiny hands waving in the air as if calling out for his mother. Tieu sat down, lifted him into her arms, and began to nurse him. The child drank eagerly, his little fingers gripping her shirt, his face full of contentment. Watching him, she brushed his soft hair and smiled, a tender smile, though her eyes carried a faraway sadness. Outside, a mother hen led her chicks across the yard, scratching at the soil in search of worms. Their clucking mixed with the wind and the sound of the stream, forming a familiar melody, the tranquil symphony of a rural midday. When the baby fell sound asleep, Tieu gently laid him on the bed, pulled a thin blanket across his belly, and stood quietly watching him for a moment. In her gaze were love, hope, and a trace of worry, the kind of silent fear only a solitary mother could understand. Then she stepped back outside to finish her work. The noon sun scorched her skin, but the wind still blew softly. Life went on, simple, quiet, and somewhere deep within her heart, something unseen seemed to be waiting just beyond the horizon. While she was bent over pulling weeds from the vegetable bed, Tieu suddenly heard the sound of an engine stopping in front of the gate. She looked up, her hands still covered in dirt, startled to see Hung, a refined man with steady eyes, stepping out of his car. He was the CEO of a major company in the region, admired by everyone for his talent, composure, and the kind of success most people could only dream of. Hung walked closer, glancing around the sunlit garden where Tieu's little boy slept peacefully in a simple bamboo cradle. He stopped, his voice gentle yet filled with emotion. "I didn't come here for business. I came for you, Tieu. I want to be by your side, to have a chance to protect you and your child." Her body stiffened. Her hands trembled. The hoe slipped from her grasp and fell to the ground. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. "Anh Hung, I'm not worthy of you," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm just a simple woman covered in earth and sunlight. You have everything: success, respect, a bright future. How could someone like me ever walk beside you?" Hung smiled faintly, a smile shadowed by deep sadness. He shook his head, his tone warm but resolute. You're exactly what I've been missing. The half of my life I've searched for all these years. To me, status and wealth mean nothing if I have no one to come home to. Tieu stayed silent, her eyes shimmering with tears. She knew his feelings were sincere, yet something inside her held her back. Perhaps her own insecurity, or the fear of shattering the fragile peace she had only just found. I can only see you as a friend, she whispered, hiding the tremor in her heart. Hung stood still for a long moment. His gaze drifted away from her face toward the quiet garden. Tieu lowered her head, saying nothing more. She picked up the fallen hoe and quietly walked back into the house. Her slender figure disappeared behind the old wooden door, leaving only the empty yard bathed in the soft glow of the noon sunlight, the air filled with nothing but the whisper of wind. Hung remained there for a long time, his eyes heavy, as though trying to hold on to something already slipping away. After a while, he murmured, voice low and sorrowful, I'm sorry for making things hard for you. It's just that my heart won't listen anymore. With that, he turned and slowly walked away. His footsteps echoed down the narrow path, blending with the faint midday birdsong. Behind him, inside the small house, Tieu leaned against the window frame, her eyes distant, her heart tangled, unsure of which frightened her more, the loneliness or the tender feeling that had just begun to bloom. That day it rained all morning, a quiet, heavy rain, as if the sky itself was speaking for Hung's heart. Silent, burdened, and hard to soothe. He had left Tieu's house without a word, and the rain kept falling endlessly, drenching the red dirt road and sinking deep into the soil of her yard. That yard had once been rough and uneven, but ever since Hung had quietly hired workers to level and pave it, everything looked different. Though Tieu never spoke of it, each time she looked at the rainwater shimmering on the ground, something in her chest tightened. Between gratitude and affection, she could no longer tell what name to give that feeling. After days of rainfall, the sky finally cleared. The first rays of sunlight fell softly across the courtyard, drying the earth and bringing with them a gentle warmth. In the morning, Tieu came outside, scooped water from the clay jar, and began washing the yard clean of dust and sand. Her hands moved quickly and rhythmically. The sound of the broom brushing across the tiles echoed steadily. Water flowed and shimmered under the morning sun like gold leaf. When she finished rinsing, she swept the ground dry. On the roof, a few doves perched quietly, preening their feathers before cooing softly. The sound so close, so peaceful. Tieu looked up at them and smiled faintly, a fragile smile light as a breeze, just enough to hide the trace of sadness in her eyes. When the chores were done, she changed her shirt, folded the cloth neatly, and locked the gate. Then she walked down the narrow lane shaded by bamboo toward the small preschool at the end of the village, where her 3-year-old daughter studied. The sound of children reciting lessons floated out of the classroom, blending with the faint scent of chalk and the teacher's gentle voice, softening her heart. Through the window, she saw her little girl sitting on the floor arranging dolls, her hair tied to one side, her tiny hands busy at play. The sight made Tieu's heart ache, a mix of tenderness and pride. She stepped to the doorway and called softly, "Sweetheart, Mommy's here." The child turned around, eyes lighting up, and ran straight toward her. "Mommy!" The bright, pure call made a few other children giggle in delight. Tieu knelt down and gathered her daughter into her arms. The scents of sunlight, chalk, and milk lingered in her breath. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Let's go home, darling. We still have much to do." Hand in hand, they walked back along the small dirt path. The afternoon sun stretched long, their shadows falling across the freshly washed courtyard, glimmering new again. It was such a simple moment, quiet, unadorned, yet it held all the tenderness of a mother's love, and a faint echo of warmth left behind by the man who had once come and quietly stayed in her heart. In the woodworking factory, the sounds of saws, planers, and chisels blended into a lively rhythm. The scent of freshly cut timber filled the air, mingling with sunlight streaming through the large windows, casting a pale golden hue over the neatly stacked planks along the wall. Every worker moved with practiced precision, each motion steady, familiar, as natural as breathing. Hung entered the workshop, his steps calm yet carrying the quiet authority of a leader. 2 managers, Tuan and Kiet, quickly came forward to greet him before reporting on the current operations. "Sir, the warehouse still has about 300 cubic meters of wood left," Tuan said. glancing briefly at his logbook. We're preparing to bring in another shipment next week to keep up with the export schedule. Hung nodded, his gaze sweeping over the orderly stacks of timber. Good. Stability is what we want. But make sure to double-check the source, he reminded them. Export wood must meet quality standards, and with all the forest fires lately, we can't afford any mistakes. Kiet added a few notes about transport logistics and machine maintenance. Tuan then took the chance to make a suggestion. Sir, this year's revenue is 5 times higher than last year. I'd like to propose a salary increase for the workers. It'll help them stay motivated. Hung paused for a moment, then smiled slightly. That's a fair suggestion. I'll discuss it with James and finalize the adjustment. The team's been doing well. We should also take care of their livelihoods. After hearing a few more updates about upcoming shipments, Hung asked, Has James been here for inspection lately? Tuan replied, Yes, he stopped by last week but only checked the export area. He mentioned he's heading back to his country soon, so the regular inspections will likely be handled by the technical team. Hung nodded thoughtfully, his eyes drifting across the vast workshop. This place had been part of his life since his father's time, a legacy of the family. Though the business had grown far beyond expectations, one simple wish remained in his heart. Next year, he would build a small house right here beside the factory, so that every morning he could wake to the familiar sounds of machines and wood, the sounds of his childhood. After finishing the discussions, Hung left the workshop. He stepped into the open yard, where the breeze carried the warm, comforting scent of new wood. A sense of rare calm rose within him, gentle, grounding, and without realizing it, his thoughts drifted once more to the image of a quiet woman in a faraway village. The field stretched endlessly in a soft green hue, the wind rippling through the young rice stalks, carrying with it the earthy scent that lingers after rain. In a corner of the garden, banana trees bent low under the weight of their fruit, raindrops sliding from their broad leaves with a steady plop-plop. Tieu placed a large banana leaf over her head to shield herself from the drizzle as she walked along the narrow dirt path. The rain soaked through her clothes, her hair tangled and wet, her face glistening with water. Within that slender figure was a quiet, unyielding strength. She hurried her steps, not noticing the muddy patch ahead. Her foot slipped, splashing water all around. The sting of the fall made her pause, but she didn't cry out. She simply clenched her jaw, stood up, and brushed the mud from her sleeves. Her gaze fell on the heavy bunch of bananas. Pressing her lips together, she lifted her knife and cut it down. The rain grew harder, cold streams running down her back. Tieu tied the 2 bunches together, looping the rope tightly before slinging the bundle over her shoulder. Her small frame tilted under the weight, yet she walked steadily, each step firm, as though pressing against both wind and rain. Far away, inside the woodworking factory, Hung had just returned from the workshop. He sat down at his desk, where Tuan had already poured a pot of hot tea. The faint scent of magnolia drifted through the room, mingling with the aroma of wood. Tuan opened his notebook, voice tense. Mr. Hung, the latest shipment is missing several planks in the standard length. If we don't fix it soon, the export schedule will be delayed. Hung sipped his tea, his expression calm but pensive. Call James's team, he said quietly. Tell them to double-check the cutting and measurements. With all the forest fires lately, we can't risk any more quality issues. Tuan nodded, taking notes. Their conversation was purely about business, but every so often, Hung's gaze would drift, distant, as if his thoughts had wandered somewhere far away, where the sound of rain still echoed in memory. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped completely. Droplets clung to the banana leaves, shimmering under the soft post-storm sunlight. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of wet earth and wild grass. Carrying the large bundle of bananas on her back, Tieu walked slowly along the village path toward the market. Her feet were caked with mud, her clothes gradually drying in the breeze. She looked small, yet her stride remained steady, calm and resolute against the quiet of the afternoon. At the market, she set the bundle down by a wooden awning and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Rope marks still traced her shoulders, but she only rubbed them gently without complaint. People passed by in a constant flow, voices calling. The aroma of evening food drifting through the narrow street. Tieu sat quietly beside her stall, smoothing each green bunch of bananas and smiling softly whenever a customer stopped. "Bananas from my garden, just cut this morning, still fresh," she said warmly. One bunch after another was sold. As the market thinned out, she counted the few small bills in her fabric pouch and sighed softly, just enough to buy some rice and a little milk for her child. The sky cleared. The last clouds drifted lazily away. Slinging the now empty rope bundle over her shoulder, Tieu walked home slowly. The village road glistened with sunlight after the rain, her shadow stretching long across the damp earth. Another day had passed, simple, full of quiet struggle, and somewhere deep in her heart lingered the faint echo of a gaze that once rested on her with warmth, one she could not quite forget. That morning, Hung arrived at the construction site to inspect the building materials. The rumble of trucks carrying sand, gravel, and cement filled the air. Dust drifted hazily through the early sunlight. He walked along the loading area, observing each mound of sand, each neatly stacked pile of bricks by the roadside. The site supervisor walked beside him, checking the inventory as he reported, "Mr. Hung, 2 more truckloads of sand arrived this morning, but one got wet from last night's rain. We'll need to dry it out. The cement should last us until the end of the week." Hung nodded, eyes focused on the construction ground. "All right. Make sure to sift the wet sand. Don't let impurities mix in. This project has to maintain its standard. I won't tolerate mistakes." They stopped by a shaded rest tent where a few workers were sitting, sipping tea. The supervisor poured a cup for Hung, smiling teasingly. "Boss, work's going well, the wood factory's running smoothly. Maybe it's time you thought about settling down, huh?" Hung paused. A faint smile crossed his lips, but his eyes dimmed with thought. He didn't answer right away, just looked out toward the blue sky after the rain, where sunlight glinted on the sand like scattered gold dust. In his mind, the image of Tieu appeared. A simple woman, calloused hands, yet eyes gentle and clear like an autumn river. He let out a quiet sigh. "If I could, the only woman I'd want to marry would be her." Back in the countryside, Tieu had just returned home after a long day at the market. The pain in her leg pulsed sharply now and then, but she quickly wrapped the wound before returning to her chores. Her baby boy had just woken up. He didn't cry, just lay quietly on a small mat, his round eyes following his mother's figure moving busily around the porch. When the cleaning was done, she came over and knelt beside him. Seeing her, the baby waved his tiny hands in the air as if saying, "Mama, hold me." Tieu smiled, scooping him into her arms. The sweet scent of milk on his breath softened her heart. After nursing him, she laid him gently back on the mat and went outside again to continue her unfinished work. She turned the soil for her vegetable beds, cleaned the pigeon's nest on the roof, and moved among the chickens pecking and scratching at the earth. Her every movement followed a familiar rhythm. No rest, no complaint. Only the quiet perseverance of a mother working alone to keep life steady for herself and her child. By late afternoon, when the sunlight spilled golden across the porch, Hung arrived. He stepped into the yard and saw Tieu limping slightly as she shoveled soil, a red wound still visible on her knee. Alarmed, he hurried over. "You're hurt? And you're still working? Go inside and rest, I'll finish this." Tieu froze for a moment, lowering her gaze to avoid his eyes. "It's all right. I'm used to it. It's nothing." Hung frowned slightly, taking the shovel from her hands. "Please just rest. I mean it, I can handle this." She stood silently for a few seconds, then nodded and stepped under the porch. Watching him work, his broad back bent, sweat darkening his shirt, a strange ache stirred in her heart, a mix of gratitude and guilt. She didn't quite understand it, but every time he came, her heart grew both warm and uneasy. Uneasy because she couldn't help but feel that a man like him shouldn't have to care so much for a woman as ordinary as her.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mọi người thường hay thấy là mình sẽ đăng video Lý Tử Diệp ở trên kênh của mình, nhưng mà hôm nay thì mình đăng một video hơi khác một xíu. Đó là video về câu chuyện của lytieuca và CEO Hùng. Thì trước đó thì mình cũng đã từng làm một vài video về nội dung của lytieuca và CEO Hùng ở trên kênh của mình rồi, nhưng mà cũng một thời gian lâu rồi mình chưa có đăng thêm về video này. Bữa nay kênh của Tieuca và Hùng thì cũng đã tạo kênh mới nên là giờ mình mới làm nội dung và đăng lại. Và mong rằng mọi người sẽ ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhiều hơn. Và mọi người ơi, nếu yêu quý kênh mình thì hãy theo dõi kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Bây giờ thì trời cũng khá là khuya rồi. Chúc mọi người một buổi tối ngủ ngon. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Bye bye.